Hello, I'm Dr. Alexander Pittman, and I teach African American history and social studies education at Colorado State University. Like many of us, I'm curious about the place where we live, especially the people who lived here in Fort Collins long ago. I'm here in the city's historic Grandview Cemetery, where we find a tangible connection to our community's past residents through names, dates, and epitaphs etched in stone. Learning more about the early Fort Collins residents who are buried here offers a valuable perspective not only on our city's history, but also the broader events and trends in American history. Juneteenth, the annual holiday on June 19th, when Americans recognize and celebrate the freedom of African Americans who survived enslavement, has connected stories rooted right here in the Grandview Cemetery. You may be wondering how Juneteenth and the early Fort Collins history are connected. Fort Collins began as a military fort created to protect migrants moving into the West. The migrants were making it hard for Native people who already lived in this area to use the land the way they had for hundreds of years. The first people who lived here, including the Cheyenne and Arapaho, were forced to move to reservations and create a new way of life. The Civil War was fought in the same time frame. You may be surprised to learn that large numbers of African Americans who survived enslavement and were freed after the war ended also came to Colorado and other western states to start a new way of life. We're going to explore the stories of 5 of those people who are buried right here in the Grandview Cemetery. Charles Henry Clay was born in October of 1828. The Robertson family of Callaway County, Missouri enslaved Clay for the first 33 years of his life. When the Civil War began in 1861, he was in the process of purchasing his freedom. That year, he left Missouri planning to join an uncle in San Francisco, but he made a detour to work as a cook at Fort Laramie. Clay traveled to the Denver area in 1864 and worked for a stagecoach company and several large hotels as a cook. In 1865, he moved to LaPorte, northwest of Fort Collins, and started a brewery while still working as a cook at the stagecoach station. After a fire destroyed the Clay homestead in 1875, he moved to Fort Collins and worked as a caterer and cook. The Clay home at 317 Maple in what is now Washington Park was the center of black social life in the early 1900s. In 1908, the Clays helped build the first black church in Fort Collins, the Independent Mission Church, adjacent from their home. At the end of his life, Charlie worked as the town's first scavenger, or garbage worker, removing disposed items and trash from public streets. When he died in 1910, he was buried here in the Clay family plot in an unmarked grave just south of the Clay family monument. Charlie's wife, Anna, or Annie Garland Clay, was likely born into enslavement in Virginia in 1854. She married Charlie in the 1870s, and together they had 7 children. Annie died in 1892 and is buried in the Clay family plot near Charlie. Harkless Hicks was born into enslavement in McCracken County, Kentucky in 1862. He married Hattie Hicks in 1883. By 1900, they were living in Fort Collins. Harkless later noted that when he arrived in town, he only had 50 cents to his name. The Hicks worked as caterers and were active in the local community. They held church service in their home on Meldrum Street for a local congregation of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, an important institution for many black Americans. Harkless worked as a janitor for the Poudre Valley Bank and Scott Drug Company for more than 25 years. He died and was buried here in 1932. Hattie Hicks, Harkless's first wife, was born into enslavement in Kentucky in 1847. While living in Fort Collins, Hattie provided laundry services to other residents. She passed in 1906, shortly after the couple moved to Colorado. Josie Hicks was Harkless's second wife and is also buried next to him. She married Harkless in 1907. She was born in Texas in 1876 and died in 1922. Georgianna Coff was born into enslavement in 1853 in Mississippi. Her obituary noted that she was enslaved by the Lunn family as a child and stayed with them after she gained her freedom. She worked for the family while they resided in Grand Rapids, Michigan and Fort Collins, where she also worked for the L.R. Welch family. Coff was a skilled hand worker and spent many hours crocheting pieces for her friends. Beginning in 1924, Coff lived in the county home, where she passed in 1941. After her death, it was discovered that she had carefully saved money over the course of her life. She left her $10,000 estate to Alex Lund, who she had cared for when he was a child. Despite the final wishes in her will, Larimer County brought a lawsuit against her estate and won $8,000 to cover the costs of her care in her final 17 years of life. The remainder went to Alex Lund in 1946. When we come to a place of solemn remembrance such as Grandview Cemetery, it is an opportunity to consider that while every human life comes to an end, our stories can live on forever when we continue to share them. And every human story is worth remembering. The people you learned about today, Charlie and Anna Clay, Harkless, Hattie, and Josie Hicks, and Georgianna Coff, are a part of the full story of Fort Collins history. The lives they lived here in the late 1800s and early 1900s were fascinating and help us better understand our local history and the story of our country. Juneteenth celebrations came to the Front Range of Colorado from Texas in the 1950s and have continued to this day. Juneteenth provides an opportunity to remember our ancestors and pay tribute to them and the challenges they overcame to arrive here in Fort Collins and create new lives of freedom. The city of Fort Collins pays tribute to these ancestors every Juneteenth by decorating their burial sites. You can visit them yourself if you would like, but please remember to follow the city's cemetery visitation policies. Juneteenth reminds us that learning our community's full history, particularly the lesser known parts, deepens our understanding of who we are as a community. It's through connecting to the past that we build a more honest, connected, and inclusive future. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about these people who contributed to the rich history of Fort Collins.